Outdoor radio. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? Especially in the world today of social media and of live streaming and of podcasting, to do a radio show. Radio, in my mind, was like, well, not in my mind, undisputedly, one of the early forms of mass communication, of broadcasting. And it's still strong today. Very strong today. And the fact that I've been in broadcasting now of one form or another since I was a kid, since I was like 22 years old, something like that. Been doing it more than 40 years now. I think it's interesting to see the evolution of communication and my personal evolution on how I have tried to reach people. Started out as a news videographer, the guy behind the camera, down at WJRT TV 12 in Flint. Did that for a couple of years. Worked my way into doing some reporting. Ended up, half behind the camera, half in front of the camera. Made the jump up to WNEM TV 5 and 7, which at the time was the big dog. I mean, that was a huge jump. That was a good deal for me. There I was a reporter, and still did some video stuff, but mostly shot my own video. Did some reporting, covered agriculture, covered crime, and decided, I don't want to cover city council meetings my entire career. What can I do to combine my passions, which are videography, storytelling, and the outdoors? Because as a kid growing up on the west side of the state, I grew up hunting and fishing in the outdoors on a farm. And at the time, there was this show on TV called PM. Well, no, I'll back up. So I started doing some outdoor reports. I snuck them into the newscasts. I had to come up with a newsy angle on them or an economic impact angle to justify to the powers that be why I was out covering these hunting and fishing stories. And they got a good response, as you would imagine, here in Michigan. People love that kind of stuff. So I started doing more and more of them. And then we started this thing called News 5 Outdoors. Now, if you remember News 5 Outdoors, you're old. But I am too, so it's all good. That was very, very popular. There was a show on TV5 at that time. It was called PM Magazine. So I pitched a proposal to the powers that be, said, let me out of the news department. Let me produce a monthly outdoor television show. And the powers that be said, yeah, we think it's a good idea, but we'd like to call it Outdoor Magazine so we can play off on the popularity of PM Magazine. Well, I was so happy to get the opportunity, I didn't care what they called it. So yes, we can call it Outdoor Magazine. Did that for a while and turned it into a weekly show and got to the point where it kind of outgrew TV5. Now, the show was also on some broadcast stations around Michigan. So I left TV5, formed my own company, made the show weekly, got it on, at the time, the Outdoor Channel. I was one of the early shows on the Outdoor Channel. Eventually moved the show over to Sportsman Channel. And then after about 20 years, I had an epiphany, and it wasn't me having an epiphany. It was God pounding on my head saying, this isn't the right move for you anymore. Make a change. Get out of it. And for several reasons and factors that I won't go into here, I did get out of television. And it did scare me at first. I thought, oh, man, what am I going to do? I'm the outdoor television guy. At least I was for many years. That's how I think of myself. That's how people relate to me. Well, I had started this little radio gig. What do they call it? As a side hustle these days. I'd done that a few years before. Started that show out on WMAX in Saginaw. And it was a 1-hour weekly show, a live show. Expanded it to 2 hours. Picked up WTRX in Flint. They were sister stations, so I was on 2. Then had the opportunity to join a statewide network out of Charlevoix. Did that for a few years. That network kind of went belly up. There was another network waiting there that I had been talking to for a long time. They said, come on over to us. But if you come over to us, it's got to be a 3-hour show. So there I am, doing a 3-hour weekly radio show as my main gig. Social media wasn't very big yet at the time, so it was strictly the radio show and some Facebook posts or whatever. Since then, things have evolved and morphed into the 3-hour weekly radio show that's now on 33 stations. Podcasting. I do make a podcast version of the show available. And a lot of social media stuff too. So my point in this whole convoluted story here is as I look at how communication and reaching people has evolved and changed. It used to be, back when I was at TV 5 years ago, if I wanted to go live, I needed a videographer, I needed a live truck, I needed a studio at the other end with a director, a producer, an audio guy, an engineer to make this whole thing go live on the air. Right now here in the radio studio, as I was getting ready to record this show, I did a live segment called Behind the Mic, and I did it with my cell phone and a laptop. It is so much easier these days to reach people, and the area that I choose to live, the world that I choose to live, is the world that I am passionate about and love, and that's the outdoors, hunting and fishing and shooting and trapping. So it's been a good ride. Honestly, I have absolutely loved it. I have absolutely enjoyed it. And I look forward to continuing to try to take advantage of new technologies and new ways to communicate. I'm a geek at heart. I'm an outdoor enthusiast and a tech geek at heart. So I love this stuff.